and welcome to Galley Stories, stories of the Bering Sea and beyond, hosted by Mark Kaler. My name is Penka Jane, podcast deckhand and longtime listener. We'd thank you to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. Here's today's catch.
Hello guys, and welcome back to another installment of Galley Stories, stories of the Bering Sea and beyond. I am your host, Mark Kaler. Today we've got a returning captain with us for a very special reason. We've got Captain Bart Eaton returning, and what he brought to me today was an actual copy of the Kodiak Mirror, the newspaper from Kodiak, Alaska. The date on it is Monday, August 2nd, 1971, and I'm just going to read the first paragraph of it to you. It says, yesterday, Sunday, August 1st, 1971, may very likely become a historic milestone date marking the real beginning of what could conceivably become Alaska's greatest fishery, and the beginning of a real and meaningful competition by the United States with other foreign nations for the rich marine resources of Alaska's vast continental shelf area. So what this is saying is it was the first trip ever for what was previously called the frostfish, but now called Alaska wild pollock. Bart, you were on that very first boat to ever go out and do this. That was on that date of August 1st, 1971. The boat was the Peggy Joe?
Yes.
Okay, so let's hear about the experience. What brought it together, and did you know that you were going to be introducing what has become today the greatest fishery in Alaska?
No, it was just a dream. I was over at, when you fished on the Peggy Joe with Oscar, even when we didn't have work to do or go down to the boat, we'd go over to Oscar's house with Peggy and have coffee and talk, and and we were in that early righteous stage where we were getting excited. You could go out to Fort Abercrombie and Kodiak and see the lights of the Russians and Jap boats out there fishing. And we didn't have any markets. Well, we were starting to get cranked up about that. Why can't we get a market? Because we knew we could catch, or not we, I was a deckhand on there. I was following orders, but I got captivated by the dream from Oscar. Mm-hmm. We were fishing shrimp in those days, and I raised a family for a few years on 4 cents a pound shrimp. We actually made money at that. So we were looking for that, and you know how fishermen are, they get to talking to each other and getting everybody cranked up. So one day we're over there, and Oscar said, well, let's go out. We can prove we can catch some of that. And Oscar had an old bait net, because we used to catch our own bait for crab, laying out under the trees, and it half snowed and everything, so it's all stuck to the ground. Mm-hmm. And we go out there, and there was another crew member with me, Danny Olson from Kodiak, and Ron Jolin. I wish they were here because they could tell their side of the story. Everybody's got a side, mm-hmm. I shouldn't say this, but I usually don't read bibliographies because you can't tell the story straight. You gotta, so add a little to it. I usually preface anything I tell a story, like in the movies now, they say, based on the truth. Certain things were added for cinematography and poetry, yep. All that stuff. But so there may be somebody say I'm a little bit full of shit, but I'm used to that. I've been hearing that since kindergarten. But anyway.
So you went out and got this net from out underneath the tree?
And to get it off the ground, we had to hook it up to Oscar's 4-wheel drive truck and pull it, break it loose from the ground. And, oh man, none of us knew how to really sew up a net. We did what I remember in those days said koozie, and I think that I know what it meant. It meant just sew up that hole. You don't sew up mesh by mesh by mesh. We used to sew up the hole.
Right.
So we took it down because we were rigged up to fish shrimp. And there was so much shrimp in those days, you didn't really have to sew up your net, just do a koozie. So I'm a koozie fisherman. But anyway, Oscar got us all excited about going out to Shelikof Trace Strait and try and catch some pollock. Or cod, because they both came together. And cod was good because we liked eating cod. Cod is a great fish. Mm-hmm. So we said, okay. And the crew members, I remember, were kind of, well, Oscar, it's going to cost fuel. And we're paying food, fuel, and bait. We were kind of, well, who's going to pay the fuel on this? And Oscar says, I'll pay it all. Don't worry, But us being crews were worried about what's the cost of this fuel doing this experimental stuff.
Right.
And so anyway, we all went out there and we made, I think, 3 tows, and we wound up with about 15,000 pounds down the bottom of the boat. And so we brought it into town, and nobody really wanted it, but back on the East Coast, they used to deliver fish in boxes. That's how they used to do it. So we got some wooden boxes, put about 25 pounds in them, and went to the different processors and set it on the front step. Just trying to
rang the doorbell and ran away, or
no. We said, God damn, we can sell this stuff. It's right out there. So and we were always agitated about it because being fishermen, we were anxious to get it going,
right?
Just to fish it. And of course, the more we got going. And of course, we always had a big conspiracy, like fishermen always have, that the cannery, some of the canneries, and a lot of them were Japanese owned. And our suspicion was they just didn't want us to get going, which was a reasonable thing. Mm-hmm. But we were agitating against that with Senator Stevens and Don Young and everybody. We got to get them out of here. So anyway, one thing led to another, and we made up our minds to go get this fish and brought it and gave it around, and it was kind of a joke. Not for our sake, but if you read that article, it's just a bunch of fishermen. But we all got captivated on that dream, and that's actually when we really started agitating for the 200-mile limit, that or something like that. We really didn't envision the 200-mile limit would be what it turned out to be, but it turned out okay for everybody. And so we got that going. We brought that fish in, gave it all around, and got all excited about it. And that is, as far as I know, unless somebody can find a fish ticket, and I don't think there was ever a fish ticket on this. We all had our crew license and fishing license, but I never asked if, because now you can't drop a net in the water without 3 days of administrative work.
So, yeah, it sounds like maybe Dyson based on this article, it sounds like Dyson kind of got the idea from his brother John, who was visiting from the East Coast.
No, John was there just to visit. He didn't get the idea from his brother. His brother chimed in about here's how they do it on the East Coast, because Oscar came from the East Coast.
Gotcha.
And I got to throw this in about Oscar because it's kind of good too. He came from the East Coast like a lot of younger guys did in those days, Second World War, to get construction work on building the Alaska Highway. Because they all thought the Japanese were going to come down from Attu and Akitant or Adak until the Battle of Midway, of course. That changed their plans. Mm-hmm. So he came out to the West Coast as a masked marvel in a carnival, where if you could stay in the ring with him 3 rings, you could make $100. Oscar's since passed away, but most people didn't know he had a shriveled arm. Because he got about to Nebraska and he jumped in there with this big farmer, and the farmer started cranking on his arm, and he wouldn't let go. And Oscar tells us that he whispered to the guy, "Just back off, and you'll get your $100." but Oscar and you. A lot of people, unless they've been around Oscar and done things, they didn't know that he had what he called a shriveled arm, because it never came back 100%.
Right.
But anyway, that's how he got out there and fishing. And then he and Nellie were But for me personally, working on the Peggy Joe was one of the best things I ever did.
Was that? I'm trying to remember back on one of the episodes you did. Wasn't the Peggy Joe one of your first boats, or was it much later than that?
No, it was one of my second and third boat, but that was the first boat I saw when I went to Kodiak in the boat harbor. Peggy Joe was one of the first steel boats built, and the first boat to have a NOAA loan of some kind. I mean, it was way ahead of everybody doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was but I got to know Peggy, and Oscar. And when you worked on Oscar's boat, you were kind of adopted, and because it's just like being in the military with a master sergeant or a gunny or something. You don't want to disappoint them. You wanted, and they were great. And I was with Oscar when Peggy first started giving the weather. We'd be down at the south end of Kodiak, and Oscar would call in, because Peggy in her house had this. I remember this radio. I think it was a Cornell, a little brown radio that you had to switch to 2145 or something like that. But I think it was the antenna or something, and she had a voice that would, I think the word is modulate good. I mean, it would travel clear to Nome on the same radio. Oscar'd try and talk on it, and he sounded like a frog croaking. But Peggy just had that unique voice. So Peggy started almost every morning after National Marine Fisheries. She'd give a weather forecast, and then the tugboats and everybody would call into Peggy. I'm at Cape Saracheff and it's blowing 15. Not so much what the weather forecast was, but what the weather forecast is.
What's happening?
Yeah. Right there. So everybody started calling in to her, and then she got to where she was calling messages and call some guy on a boat and say, "Well, it's a boy. It was at 4 o'clock yesterday morning." And all those, and your girlfriend's getting kind of nervous, so you haven't called. Stuff like that.
She's been mentioned a lot in previous episodes.
Well.
She's a rock star, a movie star up there. She is well known.
Well,
but I didn't realize the connection that Peggy Joe is Peggy.
That's Peggy. Peggy Joe was their first daughter. Well, I think it's her only daughter. But yeah, so is Peggy Joe. In fact, Oscar I'm a kid. I don't know how, well, I'm kind of a kid there. He always said, when you get a boat, never name it for your daughter because you'll never sell the damn thing. He says, because you got your, yeah. Well, back in those days when you were on a boat, like the crew, right? We had Danny Olson, Ron Jolin, Pete Harris, but he wasn't on this trip, but we just kind of hung out. We were part of the
family.
It was a real group thing, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Did you try any of that pollock on that first trip? Did you eat any of it?
I ate some cod, and I think with 15,000 pounds and no place to sell it, everybody had some pollock in town. Everybody that wanted some would come down and get it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is what impresses me about, number one, being about lucky to see it all, and still be able to tell a story, because Oscar's gone, Nellie's gone. I haven't seen the other crew members. I went up for Oscar's funeral when he got killed in a car wreck up there. In fact, I was real honored because Peggy asked me to give the eulogy, and so I saw all those guys in. But we had some, and it's kind of discouraging to me. Not that it means anything to anybody, but now I guess they're gonna kind of retire the Peggy Joe from the not Trident fleet, but
BNN.
BNN. But there's stories about that. I was on there and I learned we had the first row crane ever built. And that big bull gear on the bottom was a stainless steel gear out of a B-52 nose. That was a big gear. And I know Oscar and Nellie had to sign a release form with Rowe that if this thing didn't work out, because it all sounded good, but until you know, you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
All the unintended things. And so they had to sign a release that they'd never sue if it
Something
broke
went wrong.
or something like that. So Oscar was always on the leading edge. Back then you didn't worry so much about liability.
Well, first steel boat, first crane, row crane.
Yeah.
First Pollock. Sounds like you guys took.
Well,
care of a
now
lot of
see,
firsts.
I could stand corrected. Somebody else may that I just don't know about, but I'm pretty sure that was
Well,
a first.
even if it was happening, it was all Surimi, right?
No, there wasn't even Surimi yet.
It was just.
There was nothing. So we just went out. Well, the main thing, it was always up to the fisherman to prove he could catch it.
Mm-hmm.
But National Marine Fisheries was starting to catch up because there was a research boat out there that caught a little pollock just doing their research, and they bought it to town and gave it, I think, to the cannery Point Chehalis. You'll notice the boats, the canneries, that's a misnomer. They weren't canneries, but they were fish plants for caught. And if you read the names on here, Gorton's, Pan Alaska, and W.R. Grace. Well, there's none of them left.
Mm-hmm.
They were there, and we were trying to get them. The one that we thought had the best aggressiveness on it was W.R. Grace, but they bought a plant there, and then I think W.R. Grace. Anyway, they didn't last that long, because when you start on fish and you don't know what you're doing, it can disappoint you real quick. And banks don't have as much staying power as the fishermen do.
Yeah, it goes on to say that the Dyson was really pushing to get this fish out there and get it in front of people.
Oh yeah, well, and then he got us, and then of course he spotted me right away because I was kind of a righteous guy. See, I'd been in the Peace Corps, and I kind of wanted to solve the problems of the world, and that didn't work out too good. But he always told me I was his white hat. That meant like the old John Wayne's sitting behind a log, and everybody's shooting at him, and he put a white hat up on a stick and see if they're still there. So we'd sit there and, hey, we got to do this, we got to do this. He said, yeah, why don't you go and do that? And said, sure. So away I'd go, and I'd come back, and Peggy would put bandages on me and stop the bleeding. But he always says, how'd it go? I said, shit, damn, went good. Got a good fight. No, but anyway, that was just the way it is, because I hardly did anything without checking with, what do you think, Oscar? He said, good, go do it.
Where did the fish go from there? I mean, after you first started, I mean, how did it become what it is today? Because
it's a step-by-step thing. It kind of went through the next year. I think the Japanese-owned cannery Bix Bonnie bought some kind of filleting, and we caught about a 40,000-pound trip, and they chilled some down in ice and sent it down to Seattle here, as I remember right, and had it filleted out and just trying to see how it would work. It's all step by step, like anything starts.
Mm-hmm.
You always just do what you can do and try and make it work and And then we got the Japanese were fishing the Shelikof Straits strong out there. They were really fishing. In fact, I think Governor Egan come down there once, and he put on a big show about he was going to close the Shelikof Straits, which he couldn't do, but he was going to do it. He had to force it. And of course, we were blessed for the years having Senator Stevens, and he was always on the leading edge of doing what we can do, and Don Young. They worked together. And one thing I say about Senator Stevens, my experience, he was smart enough. Well, I don't have to tell you he's smart, but he kind of let himself get adopted by Warren Magnuson, who was down here in Seattle. And I actually met Warren Magnuson through Senator Stevens. It introduced me. Warren was a Democrat. Stevens was Republican. He said, I want you to meet Warren Magnuson, Alaska's 3rd senator. I mean, because they both understood everything that came up to Alaska started in Seattle.
Yeah.
And you had to get together compared to now, what you see out there where, hey, you can't even get people in the same party talking to each other.
Yeah.
Let alone to go over.
Right.
But yeah, that was quite an experience.
So you were also present for the first big kind of commercial sale of Pollock.
Yeah.
Can you give us that story?
Yeah, Chuck was doing, the plant's already going and producing more fillets after surimi, and Chuck was the first one to put in a plant with what he called that magic valve, where if you had a market, you could just twist that valve. Instead of just making surimi, you could do fillets. Well, it's more than a valve, but that was the
terminology.
Yeah, because you always wanted to let your buyer know you had another option.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like Eskimos in Norton Sound told me, you got to have 2 dog teams on the trail, or you know, you got to be able to negotiate. So we had Long John Silver's buyer called up and asked Chuck. He says, Toby, I remember that name, he's the head of Long John Silver's, wants to come up and see your plant. Well, he no more wanted to see our plant, but he wanted, and then by the way, while he's up there, could you get him some sport fishing?
So that's why it was coming up. He was going up.
Well, that's where the idea struck Chuck on the Annandale.
Mm-hmm.
So we said, sure. So we borrowed a skiff from up on the Branch River from not APL, Jim Jansen. And so he had a cabin up there, and we went fishing. And so here's the head of Long John Silver's, his head buyer, who'd been turning us down for a year. No, we can't use Pollock. We can't use Pollock. Can't use Pollock. Well, Chuck's pretty clever. You pick up this guy in Seattle, and there's no donuts on the plane. You know, and Toby, he wanted to stop in Anchorage for food, and Chuck said, they don't have any restaurants that are open this time of day. So they get all the way out to Acatan, and this guy, he hadn't eaten for 24 hours, but that's the way most buyers get handled when they go out on Trident's plane. There ain't no food. So we got into Acatan, and this guy's wanting food. You know, it's a long time for this guy. So we have Pollock. And David Baskin, who's managing the plants now, was the cook. Now, Dave could tell a better story. And so Toby's, or the head of Long John Silver's, eating this Pollock. He said, man, this is pretty good. And sitting right next to him was Toby's buyer that would never, we aren't going to even try this stuff. It won't work. Well, now when the president of Long John Silver said, this stuff's pretty good, we ought to try it. Well, then all of a sudden this buyer nodded his head, yeah. So the guy didn't want to do it right away. He says, this is fresh fish. It's not the same as frozen, blah, blah.
Might be a different taste.
But he didn't know what he's talking about. Well, David Baskin's standing right there.
Abassian. Right?
Abassian, yeah. And he overheard this, and he says, I said, I got this. This is a block out of the freezer. I thought it out and everything. And so he and the president are walking around the plant, seeing all this stuff, and here's this salesman hanging on, following along beside. Like I said, pretty soon his no became the we ought to.
Yeah.
It just, and so, and I think it was within 2 weeks, Chuck memory's better than mine. We made a sale to Long John's for about 10,000 pounds. Now that doesn't sound like much, but you got to get that 10,000 pounds in.
Yeah.
And then I kind of think from that genesis, and we went fishing, caught a lot of fish, and they got to know each other. You know how it goes. And it just went from there, selling more and more and more.
Pollock's everywhere now.
Oh, it's everywhere.
I mean,
Well, what really got me excited about this story, and I'm still alive to tell the story, and you don't really need somebody to tell the story. All you got to read this article. I think the Pollock producers have come up with $1 million or something for some advertising and getting it going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's great.
You look around, you can see Pollock boats all over the place. It's a huge, going back from August 1st, 1971 with your 15,000 pounds, right?
That was it.
Now it's 3 billion. They're getting 3 billion pounds. And what's great about it is it is the most sustainable fishery out there. And I say that because they return so quickly.
Well, that all depends on that, how it's managed.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's where you get into the management of it. It was all parts and pieces of a mosaic that got, you have to do step 1, step 2, and you really didn't know step 2 while you're still doing step 1. People were thinking about what's the next, and you don't really know what step 2, step 3, steps. There was no even national fisheries. There was no blueprint. This is how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
Even when the joint venture started, and boats got experience, and and I know there's a lot of. It doesn't frustrate me because that's the way life is. But there's a lot of people fishing on Pollock boats that don't understand. It started with 15,000 pounds, and they probably have that much going out the scuppers every time they pull in 100,000 pound.
I think it's still interesting that you just took it, put it in boxes, and passed it around.
That's what like it is. Well, on the East Coast, they sell it in boxes. Box fish. You've probably seen those fish boxes from the East Coast. They're pretty heavy, been used a lot. Of course, everything's plastic and stuff like that now. No, but if they did boxes, we'll do boxes, just to show them. Because one of the main things about getting something started in the fisheries, which is what got a lot of fishermen, the regulators and the Gulf State Department always, Americans can't do that. Well, that got everybody, what do you mean we can't do it? And so that's what got everybody to kind of prove we could do it and get that market for our fish. But that's what I call the genesis. And just lucky for me, under my bed in my box, I had some of these old articles. All my slides and my pictures are under my bed in a box. And I just happened to see them. This actually came from Dougie Odell, who was Oscar's stepson. He had some of it. He wasn't on this trip, but anybody from Kodak could recognize that rogues gallery.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing about me is I'm still alive, so I still have that memory
of it happening right there.
Some things just lock into your brain of what the feeling was. Let's go do it, or let's do it.
Yeah.
And that was kind of exciting at the time, and the dream and the wish.
So did you start then ordering better nets for?
Oh, well,
of course. And
sure. When they got into joint venture was the first, and there was some of the fishermen there. The guy I throw a name out, I was pretty good friends in Kodak with Larry Garrison, and he had built a boat. And I'm talking to him one time, I remember, and he had researched. He was a researching guy. He'd gone over to Norway and Nova Scotia and everywhere. We were talking about fishing and nets, and he said, Bart, what you got to do is go over where they don't have any fish, and they can catch them. We don't even know, because we, like they say, Alaskans are the worst fly fishermen in the world. because you tie a fly on your hook and you drop it in the water by accident, boom, you got a fish. Because there's so damn many fish.
Right.
So, anyway, and it was a learning, these guys, and some of these guys are great fishermen, whatever it is, they studied it. Competition. Oh, there's a lot of guys that could, and joint ventures just took off. And thankfully, we worked at the 200-mile limit. They worked them out. They worked the foreigners out. Now, I have to tell you, the foreigners did help a lot, because we had markets and we got going. And
yep.
We learned, and, it was herky-jerky. But, so and I've listened to every one of your podcasts on there. It's really funny for me because it kind of dawned on me, all your podcasts are different names, but a lot of the same experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's only so many things can happen to you on a crab boat or a pollock boat.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people have had the same kind of experiences. The interesting thing with your stories that people tell, you've had some women on there, and when you're talking down on Ballard Avenue somewhere, there's not many women hang out with the guys in the smoke shop.
Yep.
And you can tell those stories, but you get some ladies talking on here. I like those stories because you see it from the other side. I mean, not the other side, but that.
Do you know who the Salmon sisters are?
I don't know them, but I sure know about them.
Yeah, so we've been talking to them about recording too, and I can't wait for them to, because they were born and raised into the industry. And
oh yeah, well that's see, everybody's a different thing.
Mm-hmm.
Being like when I fished out of Kodiak, that's the best of all worlds because you go out to fish 3 days, you come home, empty the fish, go up to Solly's, have dinner, get on the boat, go back out and fish. Well, we started moving to the Bering Sea and being gone for a couple, 3 months. Of course, that's not quite that much now, but most of the guys, I'm sure if they were like me, my wife didn't have a clue. She didn't have a clue that the risk she was taking by being married to a fisherman with a boat. I remember the first time I wanted to borrow money from a boat, we go into the bank and my wife's sitting there with me, and she's smart. But she'd never heard the bank say, she's reading everything for the first time, because I wanted to get this done quick and get out. She said, "What's this jointly severally mean?" And the banker's kind of looking there. I said, "Don't worry about it, that's just a nautical term." And the banker about dropped his false teeth. Because she was signed right. She didn't know if something went wrong, it meant everything. The shoes you're wearing, the house you're living in. So, yeah, that's a...
It's a nautical term.
Nautical term.
Damn.
That's how I explained it.
Yeah.
But, you don't come home and tell everything. Oh, it went great. Yeah. And as long as you lifted the hatch, you had a full load of crab. It was great.
Yeah.
No more explaining. It was just the way it was.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah.
Well, you've seen this pollock thing, obviously.
Well, I was, I'm going on 80 now. It's a miracle. That's just a miracle. But I've seen, when I was on the shellfish, on bear-dye crab, Ivor went. We had Pacific pearls. Came in and said, "Why don't you bring 10,000 pounds of those bear-dye in and see if we can sell them?" We were selling crab in Kodak. So, because we used to get that much in bycatch, and we'd throw them overboard all the time.
Bear-dye?
Yeah.
That's my favorite crab.
I know, but I'm talking about there was no.
Yeah.
And so the skipper told us, well, if we really, and then after we brought that on, Ira says, maybe I can try 30,000 pounds. Now, I don't know if there were other people doing it, but I know in our process and on the boat. And then the skipper says, well, and boy, we thought he was crazy. We stayed in for a couple of days and sewed up 7-inch mesh. So we had smaller mesh, and, so Coogan Fox was the guy, we set him on the pot rack, lifted him up, and stood there for 2 days sewing up meshes on 7x7s.
So you could get bear eye.
Well, so you'd catch more, And then Ivor called up, says, bring me 30,000 pounds. I mean, that was just the way, you got to get that first pound, So we got 30,000 pounds. And of course, we were all, well, what are we going to get paid? That's a crewman's first question. What am I going to get paid?
Right.
And the skippers too, because you want to know what you're going to get paid. And then it just went from there. I paid for 2 college educations off the south end of Kodiak Island with bear dye crab. It turned into be, Kodiak had a lot of bear dye crab there, And you can usually catch lots of fish when you're the first one.
Yeah.
or close to it.
Sure.
Yeah. But then the Bering Sea, and when I first started on the Bering Sea, we didn't have enough markets out there, so we'd go out and fish maybe 10 days, have 1 tank of red crab and 1 tank of bear dye crab, and run it all the way back to Kodiak. Yeah, so.
Well, that's a trip.
Yeah, but, and then they started building more canneries out in Dutch where we could all get.
Yeah.
And when it started, once it got going in those days, it went. It went good. And then Wakefield's or Pacific Pearl built had a crab plant in Captain's Bay. Then Pacific Pearl built the plant, and Unice had the plant. And, yeah.
You see those quotas, like the last couple of years, especially decreasing, but you don't see that with Pollock. I mean, slight adjustments, but the Pollock just keeps coming back.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know how it's all gonna go. See, I've always what I call had a pair of bifocals on, where I could see where I'm walking and then I could see where I'm going. So you look down, and I'm pretty apprehensive, because that's the way I am. I'm kind of apprehensive about what's going to happen with all this warming and the ice, because I'm a believer in ice for the fish. My way of thinking, ice is a part of the cycle up there. And a lot of those pollock go clear up to that ice edge, and they feed off that algae that grows on the ice is full of algae, full of it.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's less ice, there must be less algae. And a lot of the algae is fed by the walrus excrement and the bird excrement on the ice. Well, if there's less ice, and you're hearing stories about the walrus go to the islands and the birds aren't as many birds. I just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
See, but anyway, pollock is but it's on both sides of the line up there, and they migrate around. These fish swim, so we're gonna see. I'm real excited about this Canadian group that started salmon research up in the Gulf, going to different areas, trying to track down where they spend the winters and the summers.
I saw that group tagged 25 kings, right? And like 19 of them were eaten. That they're tags.
I don't know. I'm kind of a king aficionado. I mean, I like to catch them. I spent a lot of time up in Norton Sound and those other areas. I just don't know. One of their goals on that trip is to find out what is going on with the coastal rivers up here on kings. The run's going down, and they're trying to do more research out there. I don't know. But, with any fish, from the time they're born to the time you catch them, sometimes you got to have 4 or 5 good things happen in 4 or 5 different years.
Mm-hmm.
Boom, boom, boom. It's not just one spawn or one this. It's a series of things.
Mm-hmm.
And at least now they're starting to do research on the high seas. You know, one of my goals was never get anything done was to research the high seas gillnet fleet. You know, there used to be a lot of salmon fishing out there. Japanese, say the Koreans, the Taiwanese, and research if you can find out time and areas where they caught kings and sockeyes, and they spent years out there. You know, those guys know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't know. I mean, it's a mystery. You know, I think it still is, and I've always been concerned. We can count the fish going up the rivers. We can count the fish going down the rivers. But what's going on out there, we don't know a lot.
Yeah.
And at least they're trying. And so we'll have to see how it. There's no one thing does anything. There's no silver bullets in the fish.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, there's getting to be a lot of research, and I'm really enthused about the Canadians doing that. Of course, they're doing it. But I think if we can get something going in the Bering Sea also, because that's from the rivers north of the chain, I think there's a lot up there we can learn. But then you look at the Nushagak and shit, they got fish boiling in there. There's a lot we don't know.
Yeah, you would think that Canada would actually be involved over in the Yukon too. You know, because that river feeds all the way.
Yeah. I don't know how much. Well, don't get me on Yukon Kings. If you ever ate a Yukon King, that's it.
Yeah.
They got to go. You know, they stop eating when they hit the fresh water.
They got to go 800 miles.
800, and that's maybe damn near 2,000 miles on the fat that they have. So if you can get one down there, and I've had a few that came out of shrimp nets, herring nets and stuff. Oh, that's a different fish.
I'm going to be in Kotzebue here in August.
Get you. What are you going to do in Kotzebue?
That's part of the fleet that I manage.
Which fleet's that?
Doing fleet manager for a seafood company. You know that.
Oh, okay.
And I'll be in Kotzebue.
I got a book. I wish I'd have brought it down here. Because, you know, we used to do a lot of herring buying. Well, you'd have to record this from Tuksuk and Tanunuk and Nelson Island.
Yeah.
And all that area. And there was a book I got from the University of Alaska on the anthropology of those areas. And you really understand what they go through and what it was like up there. Yeah.
As far as the natives go,
Yeah.
So you had a lot of interactions with that, right?
Yeah. Well, I remember the first time I went into Shaktoolik, I about throws my ass off because I just flew in there. We were going to get a herring fleet going. And I'd walk down the street. It's about 0 degrees, and every once in a while a curtain would open up, and they'd look, but
they weren't coming out to say hi.
I finally talked to school and let me sleep in the gymnasium because they had the heat going all night in there.
Right.
Finally, I started meeting guys. I got some of my best friends are from there now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, that was and I see they got a crab fishery going up there. Yeah.
You're constantly pulled back to Alaska. Constantly.
Well, I got a reservation to go up there about the 10th. Well, I built a cabin.
Yeah. Yep.
You gotta. And southeast. Yeah.
Go up there and spend the time. Anything else you want to share with us, Bart?
No, I just wanted to make sure I got this thing. I just kind of.
Oh, let's see what that one. You didn't show me that one.
No, that's the second trip.
Okay. Miles and miles of fish.
Well, that's Oscar again.
Where's the date here? There's no date on this one.
I think it's just maybe 6 months after this. I was on that trip, but I was the cameraman. See, and this B&B was a Japanese owned. Bix Bonnie.
Everyone knows there's a bottom fishery around the shores of Kodiak Island. The foreign fleets long ago proved that.
Yeah.
How big the resource is, other than vast, nobody can say with any degree of certainty. Let's see. Wow. So on this one that you gave me from
Yeah.
the first trip, the other headline on here is "Explorers Return to Command Ship."
Yeah, well, that's
That's just putting you a date stamp in time there.
well, it's stamped in time.
Yeah.
And this was a follow. I think they came in with 40,000 on that trip, and those were iced down and shipped down to Seattle in a container to try and get more feedback from the quality control and the food service and everything.
Well, excellent, excellent.
And here's a great. This is kind of my iconic picture of Oscar.
Man,
Yeah.
he's got his waders flipped down.
Well, he was a hell of a guy. You know, he was on the Board of Fish. He was on the North Pacific Council. He was.
Sounded like he was a good mentor for you.
Oh, well, I love that guy. Yeah, he and I were really good friends. Oh, I had a lot of good mentors. I had a lot of skippers that were really, really good. Yeah. Like I've always said, well, not always, but you know, when you get a little older, you're not quite as sure of yourself, and you're a little more reflective. Because I've had to duck a few times with the Grim Reaper. Took a whack at me, and I happened to duck. But it's really amazing how many guys help you out. Yeah, and having Peggy there, you know, Peggy, and it always was in Kodak. It was Oscar and Peggy. I mean, that's all one word.
When's the last time you saw the Peggy, Joe?
Oh, Jimmy McManus and I went over to Ivers and had cod, and I could look through the trees and see it sitting there.
Yeah, she tendered for Trident in Falls Pass last year.
Yeah.
You think the end of the era is coming for that boat now?
I don't know.
She's retiring.
You know, don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I don't think end of the era comes for any boat. It just who owns it and who's got the dream and who got the what. And I just don't know.
But when you see it, memories come back.
Oh man, I got stories on there that just don't quit. I can't tell them.
What? Come on.
You know? No, I don't. I have a hard time telling stories about guys that are dead and aren't here to defend themselves and get another crack at me. You know,
yeah.
There's not just one story, but yeah, they were great. I think one of my kids or somebody asked me if you could do it, what would you change about your life? And I said, probably nothing. And they say, why? And I said, well, probably because if I had another life, I probably wouldn't have met the same people. I mean,
yeah,
that's what. Yeah, you know.
Yeah. And you value and
being on the boat and doing all that is one thing, but being on with Oscar and Ellie and Danny and it could have been a whole different thing. You know, it's who you're with. Yeah. In my experience, I only had to fire one guy off my boat. I only had to fire one, and he wrote me a letter afterwards and said, "Thanks for firing me."
Really?
Well, he just wasn't cut out, you know.
Yeah.
But he finally understood that. But anyway, that's the way it goes. You know, and I've heard some of your podcasts. You can tell people really develop relations. I hired a lot of guys on my boats, but I didn't keep them. The crew kept them, because if they didn't want them,
they were gone.
Well, something, the door fell on their head, or they'd pull the buoys out of the pot and hit them in the stomach, and finally the guy said, "Man, this is too rough on me." I've seen that happen. No, but I've had some great experiences with guys. I counted up the other day. There's probably a lot of skippers say the same thing, but I think I've had 12 guys that started with me that wound up running their own boats. So some good guys too. But I had first crack at them. Yeah, that's.
Maybe they speak about you the way that you speak about
Oh,
Dyson.
I don't know. I think skippers have. Well, I've done some crazy things, You know, I had a partner, Jerry Kennedy, who just passed. I don't know if you know about that. He had lung problems. I don't know if I can tell that story, because afterwards I never tell the story without him sitting there and giving me permission to tell the story, because it's a terrible, terrible story. We're out fishing. I don't know if I should tell that one. We're out fishing in the Bering Sea, and back before we had all these track plotters, I had one of those school spiral notebooks where you'd put your pot number down, and you'd put the lat line or something, and you'd put 90 degrees to the next pot, that. And after you've gone through the string about 10 times, it looks just like chicken scratches. Mm-hmm. So we got done fishing about two days long there with a little snooze, and I told the guys to go to bed. I'll take it over to another string of gear about 6 hours away. And I'm sitting there going through my notebook, and all of a sudden an Amatouli buoy pops up in front of me. I run right over it. I said, shit, I don't have any pots here. What the hell did I do? So I go back and I'm like, there's a string of 25 pots that I'd missed. I just missed. And I had a 6-hour run over to the other gear, and I'd fished all around, so I knew there was crab in that pot. And the only way to get new crab is get the old crab out and fresh bait in.
Right.
So I said, now what the hell am I going to do?
Because you just sent everybody to bed?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I must have gone crazy. So I went down there. I wanted to get those pots. So I went down there. You won't believe this, but I went down and I turned the clock up 6 hours. And I woke him up. Oh, Jesus. That poor old Jerry. And he was raw boned. He'd been working about 2 days straight. And he slept about 20 minutes. And he's sitting there drinking his coffee in his skivvy shorts. And he says, Bart, this is my last trip. I'm starting to think, maybe this isn't a pretty good idea. And I said, what's wrong, Jerry? Because I'd fished with him for years, and he'd fish with me, and he'd run the boat, and I said, what do you mean? You're going to quit? He says, yeah. He says, 6 hours sleep just doesn't get it anymore. well, then I start feeling bad. It's surprising something like that. So I run upstairs. Everybody gets out there, and they're pulling gear, but with the house being aft, I can see everything going on deck. I knew these guys pretty well. Pretty soon they're all huddled up there, pointing at the sky and looking at their watches. What the hell is it? And I could say, oh shit. Because see, I thought I'd, 25 pounds, get them down, get them to bed. And pretty soon they start talking. I remember old Dwayne Clark, he kind of just looks out of the group and looks up at me. Pretty soon the guy waddles back to the back of the house to go look at the clock on the wall. And they come on, he's shaking his head.
They busted you.
Oh, terrible. So usually what they do, they come in and have breakfast. And when the breakfast is cooked, one guy'd come up and relieve me at the wheel. No, nobody comes up to relieve me at the wheel. 2 weeks before I got invited to a meal.
2 weeks?
2 weeks. They were...
You had to just go down and dish it up, run back up to the...
They'd always leave it on the stove after they all left. 2 weeks.
Did you apologize to them? I mean, obviously they caught you.
I never did apologize. The only thing that saved me, we were catching crab.
Right.
When you're catching crab,
everything's all right.
Yeah, you can be, that was the key.
That's pretty good.
But as I'm telling the story, it may be snickering out just because we survived. And would I do it again? I don't know. But it was a bad thing to do to a man's head. 6 hours, I'll never forget him saying that. And then I had to get upstairs, and I didn't want to come down for dinner.
Didn't want to make eye contact.
Yeah.
6 hours sleep just ain't getting it.
Just don't get it anymore, Skipper.
Yeah.
That was a terrible thing to do. But I think he kind of forgave me, because I'd ask him before I'd tell the story, and yeah, go ahead. Anyway,
that's great, Bart. That is awesome.
Well, no, it's not. I'm not proud of that.
No, it's just it's a good story. It's a good story.
It's one of those things you do. Yeah.
I really appreciate you coming and sharing this
Okay, well, I
experience
just
with us today.
want to get that around. I mean, I just, like we've talked about Hamilton before. Some people live, some people die, and some people tell the story.
Yeah.
What is that? Who is that?
That is the northern hawk.
Okay, God. Probably doing Pollock.
Doing Pollock.
That's a lot.
It's a little bit bigger than the Peggy Joe.
And it's going to pack more than 15,000 pounds. Oh, yeah.
You were saying that 15,000 pounds goes out the scuppers sometimes now. And,
I'm kind of.
No, I know. But this
Fish
one here.
talking.
Yeah. This one here. If you guys listening, you can look her up. She's called the Northern Hawk. I think she's part of the Native Corporation boat, isn't she?
I know the boats.
What does she say on her? Yeah, Coastal Villages. Northern Hawk Coastal Villages.
Yeah, I don't think anybody on the Peggy Joe in 1971 had that kind of dream in their head. It'd be impossible to have it.
That's where we've come. She's got to be. How long do you think she is, Bart?
Oh, hell, I don't know. 300. I don't know. 250.
Yeah. She's sitting out of the water. I don't know. 40 feet, 36 feet, maybe.
Yeah, she probably just.
But that's how far it's come, guys. That's how far Pollock has come from the 70-foot Peggy Joe, or was she even 70?
I think she's a 90.
90?
I think
your dimensions are on here, actually.
I don't think she's ever been.
Is 100 feet long with a 28-foot beam.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100 feet long. So yeah, it's a big change right there, from the first to.
Yeah, we used to go out in that boat. I actually fished on that boat for a year fishing shrimp, and everybody made money at 4 cents a pound.
Yeah. You said you raised a family on that.
No, but it's the way things change.
Yeah, it's amazing how things have changed.
Anyway,
how big the fishery is. Okay, well, Bart,
okay.
Thank you for coming out and sharing today, and hopefully we get you back again when you come back from Alaska.
Well, I don't know. I just wanted to get that one down.
Well, I appreciate it, and I'm sure that the listeners do too. So, guys, once again, it's been another installment of Galley Stories, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Galley Stories. We hope you like what the net brought in. Please leave us a review on iTunes. Whether you like it or not, we're not fishing for compliments. Look us up on Facebook and Twitter too, and reach out to us at galleystories@gmail.com.